This is a Watch.Read.Listen special edition podcast in 3, 2, 1, 2, 1.
To the Batmobile. Let's go.
Atomic batteries to power. Turbines to speed.
Roger. Ready to move out.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to a very special edition of the Watch.Read.Listen podcast. I'm your host, David Watson. Sitting across from me, as always, is my co-host,
Dwayne Watson.
And we're going to talk to you guys about Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice. I'm sure there's going to be a slew of podcasts that are making their way out into the ether as this movie launched on the 25th. So we thought we'd get our thoughts in really, really quickly. We're going to try to keep it short and sweet, to the point, nothing too rambly. We even got a cool listener mail.
Yeah.
And we asked for. We got one. So one person actually took some due diligence to give us something. So,
I mean, it could be that a lot of people just haven't even seen it yet. So
I actually am going to call bullshit on that because I do know for a fact that a lot of my friends went and saw it when we were watching it.
Oh, yeah.
And they could have taken some time to give us their thoughts. So,
those bastards.
Justin.
So, Batman versus Superman, man. This has been an interesting ride because we've been anticipating this movie basically since Man of Steel came out, and everybody expected there to be Man of Steel 2, and then we found out they didn't know it was going to be Batman versus Superman, and then we found out that Wonder Woman was going to be in it, and then we found out that Doomsday was going to be in it, and that Lex Luthor was going to be played by Jesse Eisenberg. And they played two trailers. The first trailer we saw, we were like, oh, that sounds really cool. It looks really cool. And the second trailer we saw, we were like, oh, what is this going to be? And then now we have the movie. So I guess we want to start off with our non-spoilery section, which is, your basic impressions and things that you think in a general sense were good or bad. So
let me start off with I've actually been thinking about a way to do this in a non-spoilery way for a while because I know a lot of people I know a few people that at least we are friends with have been asking for impressions that aren't spoilery.
Right.
And whether they recommend them going now. I will say right off the bat, I actually recommend people seeing this. I've actually got to see it twice.
Right.
I went and saw it with you on Thursday night, and then this morning I went and saw it with my son. So I got to get two different kind of experiences as far as when you take a kid to a theater, it's an interesting ride.
Yeah.
My initial thing is that this is a movie that, for as epic as it sounds, for two characters whose existence they're pretty much they are the alphas of comic books.
Yeah, I mean, you don't get any characters really bigger than Spider-Man. I'm sorry, watch me. Than Superman and Batman.
Right.
I mean, even Spider-Man, which is why he was in my head. I mean, Spider-Man's iconic and Spider-Man's really important, but there are still people, I'm sure, who may not 100% know who Spider-Man was, or even, let's say, 30 years ago may not have heard of Spider-Man.
Right.
But they totally knew who Superman and
But
Batman
everybody
were.
knows who Superman and Batman is.
Yeah.
With that in mind, I was very underwhelmed.
Right.
And I think I told you when we were leaving the theater. Now, my opinion of this is kind of, to a degree, it hasn't completely changed, and I'll explain why. But I thought it was boring, as well. And that's that to me, the worst thing I think you can say about a movie is that it's okay.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, the point I made to Christina is that with Batman and Robin, as bad as that movie is,
Sure.
you can sit there and make fun of that movie and joke
Right.
around about things in that movie, you can sit there and say every single Arnold Schwarzenegger one-liner with some degree of fun,
Yeah.
and it's so bad that it's
You
but
could
there's something.
you could turn it into a good experience, even though the movie itself is terrible.
It's complete waste of time. Mediocre is the worst thing you want to be in a movie
Sure.
because you literally can be forgettable.
Right.
And I feel like I don't want to say this movie's forgettable, but it has that potential to be forgettable almost.
It could, yeah. I mean, it's at this point it's so soon that I don't know, how it's going to be. And a lot of what is going to matter for this movie might be what happens with Justice League and whether or not that turns out good or not.
Right.
But this movie for me, it really just suffers from the fact that it's not Man of Steel 2. I from the very beginning was looking for, after Man of Steel, a lot of people were like, when does Superman get to become Superman? When does he become the Superman that we're familiar with, or at least a Superman that we're somewhat familiar with? And this movie, they try to show you, but they don't do a very good job of showing you, so it ends up becoming mostly they tell you.
Right.
They tell you that Superman is good. They show a few scenes of him saving people, but the very first time he saves anybody, you're like, what is that really like is that really a Superman sort of thing?
Yeah.
You're still, at this point in this movie, you're still questioning whether this Superman really is Superman or whether he's not just somebody completely different.
Yeah, and you think that there'd be some progression because the story starts with what happened in Metropolis at the end of Man of Steel, essentially.
Yeah.
And so 18 months, I think, is what they say goes by.
Mm-hmm.
And you would think in almost a 2-year time span, he would have made some progression
Right.
in 2 years.
And they try and, like I said, the movie tries to tell you that there is a progression.
But you don't
There's
see it.
there's a giant statue of Superman.
Yeah.
Y'all have seen, if you've watched the trailers, you've seen the images of him being like the god, the savior type of figure that Superman is often portrayed as being. And yet, in the actual movie itself, in the timeline of things happening, you never really saw any of that, which is an interesting thing because with Batman, they do play off the fact that you know who Batman is, and so while you do get the origin story, which again is not I don't think that's a spoiler, because
No.
if you saw the trailer, you know that they are going to show you that how Bruce Wayne becomes Batman, which is, like I mentioned before, we've probably seen that scene as many times as we've seen Uncle Ben die in Spider-Man. It's like, let's just re-show the scene over and over and over again.
I mean, at this point,
Which is a problem, but I think you could have. This movie did start with the fact that Batman is Batman, and he's Batman, and so you kind of already know who that character is.
yeah,
They don't have to
Yeah.
rebuild the character of Batman.
that's true.
But because of the way that they broke down the character of Superman in Man of Steel, and at the end of that movie, he's not the same Superman that we're familiar with, I feel like the movie had an obligation to make Superman into someone, and that if you're going to go with the Batman versus Superman thing, he kind of needs to be related somehow to his comic book persona, because otherwise you don't have really much of a contrast between these two characters. And they don't ever get him to that place.
Yeah, they don't. And this is if we're talking about non-spoilery things, that opening hour drags.
Yeah.
It's really slow.
Sure.
And especially seeing it through seeing it through the eyes of a 6-year-old who can barely sit down in a movie theater,
Mm-hmm.
and we're still working with him on trying to get him to do that. So
Yeah.
his first movie ever was the movie Planes.
Right.
That's what, you take your kid to see a movie that you're like, okay, they'll be interested in it.
Yeah.
He barely made it with that movie. He did I think a better job when we went and saw The Force Awakens, which is still a movie that he can sit down and watch from beginning to end.
Yeah.
I had issues with him in that first hour, and it made that first hour even more glaring, like in terms of like how poorly paced it is.
Yes.
By really kind of watching him just kind of like kind of lose. He had no interest. Like at first, he was really excited about going to see it.
Yeah.
This is his first superhero movie that he's going
Yeah.
to see.
Yeah, that's true.
In a movie theater, and he was really excited about it. And just watching him kind of just go slowly, like into like not really caring about what was going on.
Yeah.
And then it's just like things happen that and they happen so out of order. I'm going to say something that's I don't think it's a spoiler because it happens in the beginning of the movie. It's the fact that it goes to show you the problems that I have with the movie. So, did you know who the photographer was who was shot at the beginning of the movie when Lois Lane is in that terrorist den?
No.
That's Jimmy Olsen. They killed Jimmy Olsen without even and didn't even name him Jimmy Olsen. He's named Jimmy Olsen in the credits.
The silence that you hear that we'll keep in the podcast is me not having anything to say about that because I am dumbstruck.
So, yeah. Everybody kept going, where's Jimmy Olsen in this movie? And literally so what I read, Zack Snyder's reasoning for this was that he originally wanted Jesse Eisenberg to play that role.
Okay.
And pull this sort of psycho Janet Leigh twist.
Okay.
Where you think, oh, Jesse Eisenberg's going to be Jimmy Olsen, so he's going to be through the whole movie, and then we're going to kill him in the first scene.
Right.
Well, that's a good idea on paper.
Sure.
But then if Jesse Eisenberg goes on to play Lex Luthor, and you just cast it with a no-name, why still do that?
Yeah, then
you literally relegated a very
Me-
popular DC character
Yeah.
to nothing.
And not only that, but if you think about that from a story perspective, you didn't gain anything from it. You could only lose. Like, you don't gain any cachet from me. Like, oh, okay, so that was Jimmy Olsen. Okay, but I didn't know it was Jimmy Olsen.
Yeah.
You gave me no reason to care that it was Jimmy Olsen. I certainly already didn't care about that character to begin with because, the whole situation was kind of terrible. And if you hear dogs, I'm sorry, but
Well, let's go through it.
it'll be fine. But that's the backyard neighbors again. So yeah, what is the point of even calling him Jimmy Olsen? At that point, you should have just rewritten it and just said he's not Jimmy Olsen. He's like Gregerson. There you go.
Man with camera.
Man with camera. Yeah.
CIA agent.
CIA. Yeah, undercover agent, dude. I mean, you could have named him anything else, but by naming him Jimmy,
yeah, he's still named Jimmy Olsen in the credits.
and you don't get any that's not something that the movie earned. This goes back to what you were saying on the way home. This movie tries to do things that it doesn't earn, and that's just like one more thing that it didn't earn. That it's completely like saying, you know who Jimmy Olsen is. After the fact, you find out that was Jimmy Olsen. So should you feel bad about that? I don't know. But
yeah, and that's my number one thing. Yeah, I think I told you on the way back. Like, this movie does things it doesn't earn.
Right.
The best thing about this movie, and this is going to be a point of contention with some people, but I actually like Ben Affleck as Batman.
Yeah,
I really like the portrayal of him. There's a lot of comments that he's maybe too anti-hero, and I can understand that. I can agree with people's points on that. Like, I still enjoy it. I was listening to a podcast on the way here. One of the guys made a great point that I hadn't thought about, but they were saying this is a Batman that's 20 years, and he's got that Frank Miller. Well, I've done this for 20 years, and it's made no difference.
Yes.
So maybe him being a little bit more violent towards criminals is an anger thing that Bruce has because he hasn't been as effective as he wants to be.
And in the movie, this is, again, to give it some credit, there are times when it really does a good job of doing the, I'm just going to show you something real quick, and I'm not going to tell you what it means, but you can kind of figure it out. When you first see what he's doing with these criminals, again, I don't know if this is whether or not to say what he does with them and why it's controversial, but when you find out what he's done to this criminal in particular, and it's in the newspaper, on the front page in the newspaper, you get the impression that he wasn't doing that before. This is new.
Yes.
This is not this isn't like he was always like this. This is something that's developed over time through the various losses. And again, talking about things that the movie shows you things, like you just see, the Robin suit, which again is in the trailer, so you can go back and look at that. But you know what's happened. You've gotten an impression of what's happened just by this scene and the looks on his face. He does a lot of, it's not like the deepest facial acting, but you can tell when he's thinking about something that's happened in the past, he's contemplating it, and you can almost see this pain. going through his performance.
Yes.
That this is not like he's not doing this out of oh hey let's go have happy fun beat up on criminals time.
Right.
He's almost like he's driven, which of course Batman has always been driven to do this, and I think he does a good job of portraying that.
Well, in this, yeah, and then there's things you could take. This is a movie which sucks in that you could take so many things out of this movie, and the movie would probably be better for them.
Yeah.
We'll get into those in spoilers, but I will say that like that's the editing of this film, and you can tell this is DC trying to set up their universe, but it's so like, hey, look what we're doing. We're setting up a universe, guys. Hey, you see what we're
Right.
doing? And it's so obvious that if you pulled all those things out of the film, you wouldn't miss them. They don't serve any other purpose in the plot or in any of the structure of the film.
That's true.
They don't matter. And that's the worst thing you could do. Like, that's why Iron Man 2 gets a lot of flack that it kind of deserves, is because it's literally going like, see what we're doing, guys? See what we're doing? Like, if there's a core complaint about Iron Man 2 is that it's a movie that's trying to set too much up.
Right.
And so, you know, that was the second movie of Marvel's shared universe.
Yeah.
So people trying to make comparisons to the two, it's really hard to do at this point because Marvel's, what, 12, 13 in?
Yeah, I don't even know.
And so
the
if
count.
you look
it
at
feels
it,
like a ton.
Yeah. I used to know the count off the top of my head. And I'm like, oh, wait.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's like they're like 12 or 13 in. And so, because I want to say, I think Civil War's the 13th movie.
Mm-hmm.
So think back to what their second movie was when they tried to start doing this. And it's Iron Man 2. Probably regarded as one of the worst of the MCU, at least the messiest.
Yeah, people do. I enjoyed the movie when I saw it too, but and remember thinking this movie's not as bad as I thought it was going to be because people were so negative about it.
Yeah. But it still does suffer from that idea of that it is Marvel really trying to be like, look at all these characters, huh? You see this? You see this? You see this?
And that's actually one thing that I'll say about this one is that it's kind of in the same vein. I don't think this movie is as bad as headlines. If you were to read the headlines and see what they look like, I don't think this movie is that bad. I understand that the headlines are there because they want people to click on the thing. They're clickbait is what it is. Now, people may feel very strongly about it. Like, I mean, and if you feel very strongly about it and you really are like, this is the worst movie of all time, well, okay. Well, number one, it can't be the worst movie of all time because there's Batman and Robin exists. And this is way better than that. But just that whole concept of like, I don't know, that hyperbolic sense that the internet does where it's like,
well, and in truth and in fairness to the critics too, it's coming from both sides. The DC fans who are the hardcore ones that are really annoying.
Right.
Let me preface this before any DC fans. There are some DC fans out there who are trying. There, you can almost get the sense of like they're the same people who are trying like so-called Star Wars fans who I don't want to say so-called Star Wars fans who defend the prequels.
well, yeah,
Trying not to be mean. They're acting in the same manner that those people do. But actually, the DC fans are probably acting to me worse than the Star Wars prequel defenders are.
Yeah.
They're trying their hardest, but they're calling it a masterpiece, and I'm like, you guys either don't know how to watch movies,
right,
or
I think
they're the ones who bring up the Marvel comparison before anybody else does.
sure.
Like they automatically like, oh, you're a shill for Marvel. You're just a Marvel fanboy. That's why you don't like this movie.
Yeah.
So they're literally like they're cornering you into a thing where it's like you can't have a good dialogue with him about what's good and what's bad.
Yeah, and I think
it's really coming out.
That
right
makes
now.
it really. That's always really frustrating. I watched 2 reviews on.
And why I don't comment on the internet.
Yeah, I watched 2 reviews on YouTube. One of which basically kind of falls where we were, where it was like, there's some cool things in here. Let's talk about. There's some good things. There's some bad things. Let's just talk about what the good and the bad. And then there was one that I watched, where one lady was doing it, and she was like, I was kind of amazed about how effusive her praise for this movie was, because I was just like, why? I don't think this movie is as good as you're saying it is. So on the one hand, it's not as bad as some people say, but it's definitely not like a masterpiece. And she was definitely in that kind of masterpiecey camp.
Yeah, and I as somebody who watches a lot of movies and has seen actual masterpieces of cinema, and I'm like, I don't. I have to raise an eyebrow at that. I just don't. That's not. and everybody's gonna like what they like. So that's the other number one thing I will preface by saying, like, before we get into, but like a few criticisms before we get into spoilers too. Number one thing, I thought this was I think I told you this too on the way back. I think this was a regression for Zack Snyder in terms of. It still looks good. It's still stylistically great.
Yeah, there were parts where I was like really like impressed with the visuals and the way the camera was set up, and you can tell this is somebody who knows.
But
that part of it.
That being said, he regresses to that Watchmen slow-mo.
Yeah.
And it's completely not needed at all in this film.
No.
Not a single frame that he slow-mos is necessary.
Yeah.
And in fact, the one that annoyed me, I think, the most is like Bruce falling down the well to with the bats.
Which is in the opening credits.
Because it literally comes off to me anyways like going, okay, well, Chris Nolan did it, and the way Chris Nolan did it was far better.
Sure.
And he's like, well, I got to add my own stylistic stamp to this because everybody's going to be comparing it to what the previous director, who happens to be an executive producer on both these movies that I've done.
Yeah.
I have to do it differently from him. Well, no, you don't really, or you could do it really quick. You don't need to extend it and do all this stuff in slow motion.
Yeah.
The other thing too that really bothered me, and this is me being incredibly nitpicky before we get into spoilers. I think I told you, is like I didn't like the fact that there were opening credits.
Yeah.
I felt like the coolest thing that DC had done, and that they could have taken away from what Nolan did and what they did in Man of Steel, which I liked it the way I liked how they use it in Man of Steel, is that just jumping right into the movie,
right?
Which is very much a Nolan thing that he does.
Sure.
Nolan does that. That's very stylistically his thing. They did it in Man of Steel, which is a Zack Snyder movie, which Chris Nolan was a producer on. And I think they should have done that with this movie as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think they should have just gone ahead and just jumped right into the movie.
Yeah.
There was no... It feels like it slows everything down to be like, we're going to do opening credits and we're going to use... I get the idea of why they did it that way, because they're like, okay, we're going to show Bruce's origin...
And that... The only reason why...
Over the credits.
Right. And the only reason why I was like... to me, I kind of felt like it worked. So I'm not nearly as critical of it as you are.
Like I said, that's why it's nitpicky. It's me being nitpicky.
If you're gonna retell an origin story of a character that we all already know, at least they put it in the credits. Where, like, if you look at like the Spider-Man movies, you know, actually they did that. They did put it in the credits in the second movie, or the third movie. But if you watch the opening credits of some movies, it's like the credits are like completely ancillary to the whole movie.
Yeah.
I
just felt like stylistically it just looked like it came off to me as Zack Snyder really trying to make this his own,
right?
Which is okay, but it literally just to me felt like exactly what he had done with Watchmen. You know, now the Watchmen opening credits are way more epic than what he did here, but it came off. This came off like a Zack Snyder thing, like him trying to basically go as far away from the Nolan style as possible.
Okay.
Where I think he should have maybe accepted that and adopted some of that.
Sure.
Because I think some of the best visual work that he's done was in Man of Steel.
Mm-hmm.
And in Man of Steel, he actually went far away from that Watchmen Sucker Punch style that he had, that he used in those movies.
Okay.
And I thought it was actually a more... What I like about Man of Steel is that I felt like a mature step up.
Yeah.
In terms of his visuals, because he's already a good visualist. There's no
Sure.
there's no taking away that from him. He's already good. I just feel like he stepped back to Watchmen.
Yeah.
And his approach to how he made this movie.
You know, and I think,
and I thought that was not a good thing for this film.
and without like imbuing this with any sort of like intentionality on the author that I don't know of, this movie is more comic booky than Man of Steel was. There are parts where it's either you can tell that it's solidly in the comic book vein that you didn't see in Man of Steel or in Nolan's Batman movies, but you definitely saw in Watchmen, because Watchmen, you know, as has been criticized before, is basically like scene for scene for the comic book with a few changes.
Right.
And so maybe that's just, I mean, he felt like he just wanted to do comic books again, and that's what he does when he does comic books.
Which is I don't know. Which is fair.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the right approach, though. How he.
Not if you're trying to make it not if you're trying to make a universe that holds together.
Yeah, and that's the thing about it. You can criticize Marvel, and I hear these very, very sophomoric criticisms of Marvel it's like people will be like, if you, I saw a dude on Facebook was like, well, if you've seen one Marvel movie, you've seen them all. And I'm like, well, you obviously don't know how to watch movies.
No.
And you have no right to criticize this, especially because he's one of those dudes who called this a masterpiece. And I'm like, well, you called Batman v Superman a masterpiece and then said, oh, if you've seen one Marvel movie, you've seen them all. You don't know how to watch movies. Your opinion doesn't matter.
It's like
That's me being harsh, but I'm gonna have to
Yeah.
be harsh because like the DC fanboys have been like, you're just like, oh God bless them all. Like I don't get driven into nerd rage, except I get mad at people who do nerd rage that hard, to where they take everything, they take all criticism of the movie like negatively.
right.
So if you say movie's okay, well, you're just a Marvel shield because you only thought it was okay. This is a masterpiece. It's like it's not.
Yeah.
Like, that's what you want it to be.
Well,
and that's fine.
And so much of that is like it's a very internet-y sort of thing where people are like, oh, everything's got to be hyperbolic. You can't like have any sort of nuance in your criticism of something.
Well, yeah, and I actually listened to a dude who had a really good point, and he actually kind of got onto the DC fanboys about this, and he liked the movie. He gave the movie an 8 out of 10 on a podcast, and he was like, people didn't like that he gave it an 8 out of 10. And he's like, 8 out of 10 is still good.
Yeah, that's a good score.
And he's like, but we live in a culture of people now, and this is how the DC fanboys have been, where it's either 10 out of 10 or 1 out of 10. There's no in between. With any in between, you're not a fan.
Right.
And it's the same kind of like crap that we were hearing, from people who love the prequels,
The Star Wars prequels.
Yeah, if you don't like the Star Wars prequels, you're not a real Star Wars fan. Well,
Yeah.
fuck you, I am. I was like, I love that movie enough I love that series enough to criticize it.
Yes.
Same with these characters in that I love them enough to be able to critique one of these movies. I honestly think this is a movie that in probably 6 months' time it's going to die down. Actually, I think before that. I think once Suicide Squad comes out, Suicide Squad will really, I think, show if Zack Snyder's the problem.
Yeah.
I sincerely, and what I mean by that is that it will show is that if David Ayers, who's the writer-director of Suicide Squad, makes a really, really good movie within this quote-unquote shared universe, it'll really, really stand out that the problems that with Batman v Superman were from a writing standpoint and a directing standpoint,
Right.
which is what my problems are.
Yeah.
They are from those 2 points of view.
Yes.
Zack Snyder is a good visualist. He
Yes.
is not a good storyteller.
Yeah.
He did really, like, to this day, like, the only reason that 300 and Watchmen are as good as they are is that he's so faithful to the source material.
Yes.
If you really want me to boil it down to that, that's why those movies work.
Yeah, the movie's already edited and written for him and laid out for him, and so then
He could bring his visual style to it.
Yeah.
which is good. That's what those movies need. But everything's already kind of there.
Right. Whereas this is a new story, even though obviously Batman and Superman have fought each other before,
Yeah.
but this is not based.
The
upon
question
anything
you have to
directly.
also say is how much blame do you lay at the feet? Do you lay at the feet of David Goyer? Do you lay at the feet of Chris Terrio? Chris Terrio won an Oscar for Argo.
Yeah, I don't.
David Goyer is.
I guess
David
this goes back
Goyer.
to the problem of when you're trying to put blame somewhere. I don't know that you can always do that. I don't even know that you need to do that. But you can say though that as a movie, this has problems. And like I've said before, really for me, most of the problems come from the fact that there isn't a Man of Steel 2.
Yeah.
That you needed a Superman movie that was just Superman to get him from point A to point C. So we needed to go through that, and we're not there. We just jumped to point C, and then you said, "Oh, just assume that B happened." And I'm like, "But you didn't show me that." And when you did try to show me it, you did it kind of in a terrible way. And
Yeah.
so now I'm sitting there going, what is going on?
Yeah. So
So I guess we need to transition on into spoilers because that's about as far as we can.
we will, and then
do,
so
so-
you have your warning now. In 3, 2, 1, and I'm gonna probably put something right after this for just a second,
Yeah.
and we're gonna be in spoilers when we come back from the break.
Up in the sky, look! It's a bird! It's a plane! It's Superman!
faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, able to leap tall buildings at a single bound, this amazing stranger from the planet Krypton, the Man of Steel, Superman. Possessing remarkable physical strength, Superman fights a never-ending battle for truth and justice, disguised as a mild-mannered newspaper reporter, Clark Kent.
And we're assuming you're still with us. If you are, we are going into spoilers.
All right.
All right. So, do we want to go ahead and let's do Tony's?
Yeah. So
Tony, a friend of ours and a listener of the show as well. He's awesome dude. He was actually the first guy to buy me a beer at my wedding.
Yeah. we met him playing Ingress.
Yes.
Way back in the day. And
he's an excellent dude. He is a huge comic book fan. I do know that. We and him have talked comic books a lot. Most of our conversations revolve around that. But yeah, he was nice enough to send us a nice little quick email. We're going to go ahead and read that on.
All right. This is what he says. He says, David and Dwayne, one of the things I love the most about comic books and comic book movies is how from writer to writer they can change and be unique while still exemplifying the essence of those characters. Tim Burton, Grant Morrison, Christopher Nolan, Paul Dini, Frank Miller, Mark Millar, Jeff Johns have all taken great steps in helping to build these two characters into what our collective vision is of them today. Zack Snyder's vision has failed to do so and has left me indifferent to characters that I've loved for years. I walked out of the movie not caring that Superman had just died and angry that Batman would be treated as an anti-hero instead of the hero he actually is. I found myself laughing at why Batman would think he failed Superman in life when he only fought beside him for 10 minutes. I was angry about how easily a master detective could be so easily manipulated. I was angry at the thought that Zack Snyder had squandered another chance to make something great. I was just fucking angry. There were no extended moments of awe, and all of the moments that had any action had already been shown in the trailers. This movie was a mess. I'd say more, but I'm not a great writer, and I'm still pretty heated and can't form cohesive thoughts. Regards, Tony Escudero. So, let's look at these comments because I think these are great. First of all, Zack Snyder's vision of the characters. I know one of the things that you said after we came out of the movie theater was you don't think Zack Snyder likes Superman.
Yeah, I really don't.
That he seems to like completely kind of miss him, but he does a great job with some of the Batman stuff.
Watching it again, like I've actually haven't gotten to see this movie twice. Yeah, he doesn't. I don't think he likes Superman at all. I think he likes Batman.
Yeah,
I really think he really wanted to make a Batman movie more than anything.
Yeah.
Now, and I agree somewhat, like I said, with Tony's comments as far as Batman goes, as far as the anti-hero angle. Now, I think context-wise, you can make the argument, like I made before, that this is a Batman who's a little bit more world-weary.
Yeah.
He's seen that his methods don't work, so maybe he's a little angrier.
Sure.
And he's a little bit more willing to take a little bit more of a violent means to
yeah,
get his
and
point
we've
across.
kind of talked around this idea, but Batman, like literally, like shoots people with other people's guns, like.
Yeah,
and then I mean,
he does stab a guy,
he stabs a guy. He
doesn't kill him.
Yeah, it's kind of unsure. To be honest, as I think about it, I'm kind of unsure about how many people actually did he kill. But there are some cases where you definitely know somebody must have died, but he didn't do it necessarily like himself. Like what they do with the grenade. Where it was that dude's grenade.
Yeah.
It wasn't like Batman's grenade.
He deflected it.
He deflected it, and then the guy got thrown over there, and then the guy failed to grab the grenade in time. But he totally threw that guy toward a grenade.
Yeah.
That he knew. And he did
well,
not,
at the same hand, I mean, look at what Batman Begins.
Yeah.
All the destruction Ra's al Ghul basically plummeting to his death in that railway car is all because of Batman and Jim Gordon.
Yes.
And Batman just says, "I refuse. I'm not going to save you."
Right.
So he made a conscious effort let somebody die.
Yes.
So
so maybe that's still in keeping with the.
To a degree, I agree that I do think this is a Batman who's a little bit more violent of a character, but I do think that the only thing, that's why I say I think Zack Snyder likes Batman to a degree, and that he actually takes the time to establish that the reason why he is this way.
Yes.
I think he hates Superman because he doesn't do anything with Superman.
No,
at
he doesn't.
all.
Yeah, this gets into what I was kind of talking around this as well in the spoiler-free part. The first time Spider-Man, the first time Superman saves someone, he saves. Yeah, it's swords. He saves Lois Lane because he loves Lois Lane,
right?
And because he'll do anything to save Lois Lane, which becomes a plot point in the movie. In fairness, has been a plot point in all the movies.
Right.
Like, the idea that Superman will do whatever it takes to save Lois Lane, that's in the movies, in the comic book, it's there.
But they've established, I think, through every other story and writing that, he's willing to do. He doesn't just do things for Lois.
Yeah, and this is the thing. Like, if you wanted me to believe that Superman has become something like the Superman that we know from the comics and from the other movies, that he's a person who truly believes in doing good for the world and in helping people out, then why didn't you start with all of the flashback scenes you showed us of him saving people from the flood, and him saving people from burning buildings, and him saving the Russian rocket?
Yeah.
Those were scenes that if you had started with that, I would have believed. Even without a second movie, I would have been like, okay, we're not getting the second Superman movie where Superman becomes Superman.
And that's where you could make the argument that this movie's poorly edited, because
I think it is way poorly edited.
It's completely just mind-boggling, because the first thing you see is this thing with Lois, and you're just kind of like, okay, so he's basically hasn't learned anything in 18 months from Man of Steel.
Right now he's still being selfish Superman who is willing to have a fight with Zod in the middle of Metropolis and not care about anyone.
And for the record, if you haven't seen this movie and you're listening to this section, if you do go watch this movie, who in their right mind is going to believe the setup that Lex Luthor has in that thing?
Oh, the idea that
I like the idea that me and you talked about this on the way home, and then in a list of Devin Faraci on Birth Movies Death at a Listicle, and the exact thing, one of the points he made was exactly what me and Dwayne talked about, was who would believe that Superman shot people?
Yes, like you have all this information.
You know how powerful he is. Yes. Why would you believe that he would do this?
Yeah,
it's like, who's buying that argument?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. These people were obviously shot. Lois knows they're shot. She has one of the bullets that got lodged in her journal, and
she was there.
And everybody's just like, well, I guess Superman shot all these people. That doesn't make any sense. This is why, again, this movie, it's like they're trying to pick up with Superman where he was at the end of Man of Steel directly. But then they're trying to also make you believe that he's developed into this cult figure of the savior person, that he has a monument statue to him in the middle of Metropolis.
Yeah.
And all of these people are like, Superman, save us. And yet he's still that same. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. So who would believe, that's the number one thing. You're like, who would believe that? Even watching that scene again, I'm just kind of like, that's dumb. Who believes this? So this leads to Senate hearings, blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. Bruce Wayne, obviously, we know he witnesses the destruction of Metropolis.
Yes, and I will say, as far as setting things up, that scene mainly, I was like, I bought Batman being really skeptical of Superman.
His motivation, yeah.
That, I was like, that's good motivation.
Well, because he's directly impacted.
Yes. These are people that he cares about. He's always been the sort of person who, as a boss, you get the impression that he knows more about what's going on in his company than people think that he does.
Right.
And he knows these people. And so when he really, when he saves Wallace, that's totally in keeping with Bruce Wayne. You know who... That makes sense, and it makes sense that it would impact him. But what does it, as Tony's mentioned here, the whole setup of Lex Luthor pulling the strings to make Batman psychologically be like, oh no, I
don't buy it. Batman's a smarter character.
And I don't know about who else, but who else thought that when you see those notes in the trailer when it says you let your family die, who else thought that was written by the Joker? I totally thought it was going to be the Joker.
I did too as well, actually.
And then it turns out to be Lex Luthor.
Yes.
And you're like, oh, okay, but but in the movie,
How interesting? But how more interesting would it have been if it had been the Joker?
yeah,
You wouldn't have had to.
that would have been kind of cool.
You could have either cut it or had it been the Joker in the first place.
But even still, like this whole setup, basically, so what happens is Lex Luthor has somehow been intercepting this Wallace guy's mail, keeping him from getting the checks that Bruce Wayne has been sending to him faithfully for 18 months, so that this guy named Wallace will be in like destitute situation, so that he can give him a new wheelchair, so that he can put a bomb in the wheelchair, so that he can go to the Senate hearing and he can use the bomb in the wheelchair to blow everybody up. That's what we're asked to believe.
yes.
And that this was in the plans, in the working for 18 months.
Well, can I say one thing too? Like,
I don't believe it.
I don't either. And it's such a bothersome idea that like he's. I think they even said like his what Luther's motivation is weak. I get the idea too that okay, he's a man who he wants the power.
Yeah.
He has the power in a monetary sense, but not in the physicality sense. There's this jealousness of Superman, but that doesn't even really fully come across to a degree. They
try to make it come across, but it doesn't really. And then it ends up just becoming like, oh, Lex Luthor has daddy issues, and that's really all that it comes down to. And again, I appreciated the fact that Eisenberg is doing something different with the Lex Luthor character. I'm still kind of disappointed that we still haven't seen the real Lex Luthor on film. Gene Hackman, I love Gene Hackman, but his Lex Luthor is not really the Lex Luthor from the comics, and neither is Jesse Eisenberg's. But at least with Eisenberg's, you can say, well, maybe his dad was the Lex Luthor from the comics. There just wasn't a Superman yet, and now he's taken over, so it's a son of Lex Luthor. So that kind of, I can go with that, and I kind of liked his like portrayal. They've kind of made it like a 21st century entrepreneur.
He fits within the world as it exists.
Yeah, he might be a little bit of Mark Zuckerberg from the Social Network.
No, yeah, and he is kind of a weird extension of his portrayal of Zuckerberg from that movie.
Yeah, just very
It's almost like a weird progression from one movie to the next.
very eccentric with a lot of idiosyncrasies. There's one part like his speech that he's giving, like he's giving this speech and then it ends up going off with this weird tangent and then he can't find his way back and he's just like, he just kind of stops and says, well, okay, that's it, and everybody go back to drinking or whatever.
Yeah.
And everybody's looking at him like, you're insane.
I have one nitpicky thing too that I think I should. I didn't tell you, but it annoyed me even more when I saw it again today. Is it has this placard come up when it goes like Metropolis, and I was like, that's cool, Metropolis, and then it goes on the day the Earth met Superman. I'm just kind of like, didn't need to put that.
Unnecessary.
Just put Metropolis.
Yeah, it's kind of dumb.
So I almost wish they had kept, because it's funny because like stylistically, like on the posters they kept with like that font.
Yeah,
like the Man of Steel font is the same font they used for Batman v Superman.
Right.
And for some reason they decided to use something completely different for the rest of the movie, for the actual movie itself.
Yeah.
Like I said, I guarantee what it is it's like it's Snyder in the film tried to step away from Nolan as much as he can.
Right.
But DC is still like by putting those on the poster, that sort of similar Man of Steel Dark Knight font is still trying to keep hold.
Yeah.
Like Christopher Nolan and his wife have a credit. They're credited as executive producers on this movie.
Yes.
You almost get the idea that like they are almost like DC can't let go of Nolan, but Nolan has completely let go of DC.
Yes.
And Warner Brothers and gone like,
I don't want to make those movies anymore.
I don't want to make those movies anymore.
Yeah.
He had no involvement on this, to my knowledge.
Right.
Like, because Syncope isn't even listed. Syncope's listed in Man of Steel, and they weren't listed in this one.
No.
But I want to say Rat Pack Entertainment that was listed at the beginning. I want to say that's Brett Ratner's company, and that's kind of bothersome.
Yeah, I don't know anything about that. But that would sound terrible if Brett Ratner were all.
He wasn't listed in anything, but I know I thought that was the name of his production company.
So we have in this movie. I don't want to make this like a blanket, like automatically this makes it bad, but you do kind of have a little bit of the problem of, okay, we're going to do Batman vs. Superman, but then we're also going to introduce Wonder Woman, but then we're also going to bring in Doomsday, and we're going to do all of that in one movie and make it somehow work. And so you end up with the Spider-Man 3 problem of, well, now we're going to do the Sandman story, and we're also going to do the Venom story, and we're going to conclude the Harry Osborn story. Like, we're trying to do so much
Yeah, it's too many cooks in the kitchen.
in one movie, and it makes the whole thing
And then you add
not
in
hold together.
You add in what they're calling Batman's nightmares.
Yes.
And this is something, except for the one. I like the one that's in there.
Which one?
The one where he's actually in the desert battling.
That was pretty cool.
That one's fine.
But they try to play that off as if he's actually really having, like, that one's actually like a vision of the future.
And then he wakes up
Yes.
and he sees
the Flash.
He sees the Flash.
Let's just say it. He sees
Here's
the Flash.
Here's the worst thing in the world. Would you have known that was the Flash if you didn't already know it was the Flash? Or would you have been like, who the hell is that guy?
Well,
because I think I had to tell Dalton that it was the Flash.
I'll put it this way. I'm okay with people not knowing that that's the Flash and then finding out later. Like, I'm okay with that. That doesn't bother me. But it is just kind of thrown in there, and it almost feels like, let's put it this way. This is one thing. This is the thing I play with my students. It's like the what if game. It's if you change this, what would the effect be, and how can you tell if this would be good or bad? So what if, instead of doing this whole Lex Luthor set up Superman, Batman versus Batman thing, what if we're just getting these visions of what the future will be like if Superman continues to kind of go down a certain path, and then Batman's he has to decide, is he going to help Superman take the right path, or is he going to stop Superman? And in this movie, he chooses to stop Superman, and so therefore you have Batman versus Superman.
Yeah.
But they don't do that. It's the same thing. It's like, what you can tell what they're doing. They're throwing in, let's throw in the Flash, and then it's also, let's get Wonder Woman in there, so then through Wonder Woman we can introduce Cyborg and Aquaman in these really
because she clicks on the files, because apparently
Lex Luthor's been
compiling them. Not only does he compile them, but he's given them their logos as well.
Oh, I know, that's great.
Also, did you notice that Jason Momoa, in the scene when they show him as Aquaman, you can completely tell that he's holding his breath.
Yeah.
I was telling Christina that, and she likes Jason Momoa because he's
Khal Drogo.
He's Khal Drogo, so
Jen likes him too.
So
and he's a beautiful looking man.
So, but it makes me laugh because I'm like, he's totally holding his breath. He's Aquaman. He's supposed to be the badass of the sea, and he's holding his breath.
And consider this,
and you can tell he's holding his breath.
We're talking about a world in which we have so much CG out there. There's so much going on. Why would you not do that as CG? Like, that CG solves your problem in that instance.
Yes.
You don't have to put somebody actually underwater in order to make them look like they're underwater.
Yeah.
And yet we do put a person underwater in real life, and then he looks like he's holding his breath. So
yeah,
I don't know. It's an odd thing. But yeah, it's again, it goes back to the
I
whole
think you could take all of that stuff out.
You can. You don't need any of it.
You don't need any of it.
No. The only thing that you really have going on...
Wonder Woman is fine, I think, to a degree.
I will say this. I'm not real familiar with the actress playing her.
Gal Gadot.
But what I'll say is that when they introduced her, I didn't know it was Wonder Woman. Like, when Bruce Wayne first sees her at Lex Luthor's party, I was like, I don't know who this is. My brain didn't make the connection, and maybe that's just because my brain is dumb or whatever, but I'll just say that I was like, oh, that's Wonder Woman. Like, when I figured it out, I was like, oh, I know what's going on. And I felt like that's kind of a cool thing.
Yeah.
It made her this woman of mystery. Again, maybe you could have done more with that.
Yeah, and my only other issue, too, is that, like, I don't know if it's the musical choice that they decided to do, but they do this, like, the music that they have over all the scenes involving either Wonder Woman or the JLA. God, I'm old. You can tell I'm old by saying JLA.
JLA.
Or the Justice League
of America, man.
It has this
America.
like pulsing like music, like, hey guys, JLA's coming, JLA's coming.
Yes.
That's exactly what that music does, and it's very annoying. It's very standout-ish. Yeah, when they did it the first time when they introduced Wonder Woman, it's cool. Like when Bruce sees the picture of her, that it works there. But then literally when they proceed to do it over every single time that the JLA is kind of hinted at, you're kind of like, okay, I get the point. The JLA is coming in 2017.
Yeah.
We got it, guys. Cool.
Yeah, I think this...
I would have been more fascinated if they had done, like, instead of doing the JL, instead of doing, like, the Justice League, why not hit it, like, So it makes me wonder, when is Suicide Squad going to take place? Does Suicide Squad take place
Mm-hmm.
before this movie or after this movie? I'm kind of curious more now for Suicide Squad
Yeah,
because
I'm interested.
I want to see where this lies in their timeline, because we know that, I think from what our understanding is, and they've shown the scene in one of the trailers, that you see Batman on top of the car that the Joker and Harley Quinn. So I'm assuming that he
Right.
captures Harley. Like, that's why Harley's in prison when we meet her.
Okay.
In the legitimate timeline of the series.
Yeah.
But I don't know yet. We won't know.
Yeah,
but
it'll be
it's made me
interesting to
more
see.
curious. It obviously goes to show you too that the way they've set this stuff up, that Batman is kind of turning into the focus
Yes.
of this DC
Yeah.
cinematic
Well, I mean,
universe.
we end with the Justice League basically going to be formed by Batman and Wonder Woman
Yeah,
because Superman's uncompetent.
because Superman is dead.
but
and
of
he's
course,
dead by like air quotes, because at the end of the movie they pretty much let you know that he is not dead.
well, and not only do we know that he's not. This is the problem. You can't actually kill Superman in a movie because we all know he's going to come back. Because that's what he does. I mean, they wrote this story. That story was written in the 90s.
Yeah, and then
And
they
even
didn't
when they-
set this story up enough. They didn't set the character
No.
up enough to earn that. That was what I talked about when I was before
They
we got into
don't.
spoilers.
No.
They really don't. They don't make you care. And Tony's right. I'm with Tony.
Yes.
They don't, like, if in a million years, if they had done that in a Christopher Reeve movie, even if it was in 4, I probably would have cried, because
Yeah.
it was Christopher Reeve and he earned it.
Yes.
They don't earn it in this
No.
movie.
And that really goes back to what I said before with you need the Man of Steel 2 movie. When I was listening to F This Movie's coverage of Superman 1978, right?
Right.
Okay, because I keep forgetting which podcast it is that but it's F This Movie did Superman 1978. One of the things that they say in that movie is it does suffer from, and I remember as a kid thinking this, that while I like Superman and I did like the movie, I always felt like it was a little bit boring. That it kind of slows down in some parts, and,
Right.
and you never really get the big like superhero comic book fight in that movie. But you need that, because what that does is it establishes who Superman is. It makes him, like, you seeing Superman save a kitty from a tree
Yeah.
makes you believe that Superman is the good man that he's supposed to be.
And the problem is that they've set up the whole movie that this sort of quote unquote selfish.
Yes. And again, all you had to do
Superman.
was take all those scenes that you showed us later in the film and move them to the beginning of the film, and then at least it would have been okay. It's still not great, though, because you need more development in the relationship with
Yeah.
Superman and Lois for us to care that he sent the wedding ring to Kansas.
Yeah.
And you need us to care about him as this good,
Right.
person trying to do the right thing and do it in a moral way. And the last thing that I'll say really about this part of it is that what I wanted to see Superman deal with the fact that he murders Zod to save people and then make a decision not to do that again.
Right.
And it would have justified everything, like all the criticisms people have of Man of Steel. When I heard them, I was like, y'all are dumb. What they're going to do is they're going to make him the Superman he's going to be. And then they don't really quite do that. And now I'm like, well, now y'all are kind of right.
Well-
but not because you're right. You're right because they did something dumb.
There's a way to make this movie and make it smart.
Yes.
Is the sad thing.
Yeah.
And make a simpler version of this.
Yes.
Number one, it has such a convoluted plot. There's
Yeah,
too
it's
many
really
wheels
complicated.
turning that you're
Yeah.
like.
You
I have an
compared-
issue. I think I told you when when I've had issues with
Yeah.
this is like I love Skyfall. I love Bond 24.
Sure.
I love Skyfall. But it hinges on the idea that the villain of this piece is either psychic or omnipotent. He's clairvoyant
Yes.
in some fashion or the other.
Yeah.
And that feels that way to this.
Well,
This feels like he
how does Lex Luthor
know that these are
know about Martha
or
Kent or about Lois Lane?
yeah,
Where did he find that out?
right.
We don't see any of it.
We're never really like I mean, not that we need to have it explained to us, but we're never really shown any reason why.
No, he just knows.
Yeah,
And
and that bothered me. Like, it made sense. Like, there's a moment where right before the fight between Batman and Superman, Clark calls him Bruce. Right
Yeah.
before the fight. But we've established that in some fashion, Clark must have put together because he sees Bruce. He hears Alfred talking to Bruce
yes,
at Luthor's party.
yes,
he's made the connection that Batman is Bruce Wayne
Yes.
because he's smart enough to figure that out.
Yeah, and I'm cool with that.
And I was fine with that.
I,
But
actually,
I wasn't fine with was the whole idea of him going, Clark.
Yeah.
You're Clark Joseph Kent. And it's like, well, how did you get that information? I don't understand.
Yeah, we don't.
It didn't
we
feel
don't
like
know
it was that
Again.
those plot points were earned.
Yeah, it's not earned. And again, are these things you could have done, in a Superman 2, a Man of Steel 2?
Yeah.
You could have done it.
Right.
So, anyways, overall, like I said, I enjoyed. This is the thing. I enjoyed the movie. I also didn't pay for my ticket, thanks to David's friend Paul. So I didn't.
Paul Bradshaw.
I didn't buy a ticket to this movie. Now you bought a ticket to this movie. So was it worth buying a ticket to this movie?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm actually happy that when I finally at the end of the day, I went and took Dalton to see it.
Mm-hmm.
Dalton really enjoyed the last half of the movie.
Yeah,
he
I
enjoyed
thought the
the
fight-
action stuff.
The Batman vs Superman fight as a
The
fight
stuff at the
by itself
beginning
is
was
great.
the stuff at the beginning it's poorly edited. It's boring,
Yes.
and it's a lot to it. It's trying to set things up, but it only sets up the Batman side of it. It
Yeah.
gives you nothing to set up really
Not really.
any
No.
kind of progression with Clark
No.
or Superman, and that's my major issue with that.
Yeah.
Before we get to the end, and I got one more point that I have to bring up because
Okay.
I've been seeing this on a lot of people going like, "Well, it's true to the source material." Here's the thing: is it true to the Dark Knight Returns? Yes, but only on the surface levels,
Right.
because people have to remember the fight between the Dark Knight Returns between Superman and Batman.
Right.
That is years of a relationship building up and colliding into this.
Yes.
This movie has not earned that.
No.
So comparing this to saying, "Oh, well, it's true to the source material," it isn't.
No.
If it is, it's only true on surface levels.
Yes. And like Tony said, him saying I'm gonna I'm gonna be earn whatever, I don't know, whatever he said. This whole thing of I'm gonna live up to Superman's legacy. They fought one time together.
Yeah. They hadn't established it's like Zack Snyder going I'm going to take all these great things from Dark Knight Returns, but the thing is you can't use that in an origin story for these characters
No, you
meeting
can't.
each other.
No.
It doesn't work. Dark Knight Returns works because of the established
Right.
relationship. It works with these characters as older men who have fought by each other's
Yes.
side and now have they disagree ideologically.
Well, and you have the same thing going on with Civil War between Iron Man and Captain America, and I'm talking about the comic, not the movie, although it is in the movie also.
I actually think because
But there's a relationship there that you've built over time.
Civil War too, the difference there is I've seen the criticism people are like, "Oh, Civil War, blah 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 blah." Civil War works because they've had 12 plus movies to build that relationship up
Yes.
between Tony and Steve that you
Yeah.
buy it.
Yeah.
And now, obviously, because we've brought up Marvel, we are Marvel shills because we thought we thought a DC movie was okay.
Yeah.
I think that's probably one of the dumbest things you could ever say to a person.
Oh yeah.
Especially due to a recording podcast in a living room with no money.
Yes.
We're Marvel shills. But
Yeah. I'm gonna get my
at
Marvel
the end of the
monies.
day, here's the thing: is it earned? Think about it from that point of view when
Yeah.
you go and watch the movie. Now, is it worth the ticket? I think everybody should go see this movie,
Yeah.
at least to be able to form their own opinion.
And this is the thing. I enjoyed my experience overall. At the end of it, I was
Yes.
I spent several hours of my time. We got there early. We were we didn't leave the theater until almost 10 o'clock. And I did not feel like my time was wasted.
Right.
I felt like my time was well spent. And I thought the introduction of Wonder Woman, for the most part, worked for me. I thought it was great, and I loved seeing her. There was something about her look on her face when she goes into fight, and she
Yes.
has this smile, this joy of battle
She has a smirk almost.
that I love.
There's a moment that I love. I'm rewatching it again with Dalton. There's a moment where she's like Doomsday hits her, knocks her back really far.
Yes.
And she has a smirk when she gets up.
I love it. And I love something simple. She has an accent. I was like, that is amazing. She does not sound like a white American woman.
Oddly enough, I've heard that a lot of criticism. Apparently, I've never seen any other movies with Gal Gadot. I've heard her acting is not that great.
But I thought I was
thought she
fine
was
with her
fine
in
with
this.
it. I thought she did good in this.
I'm not making any. She did a Wonder Woman. Now, when she has her own movie, we can judge her by herself.
That's kind of
That's
the
a
thing.
whole
that
nother
I'm-
thing.
At the end of the day, if I can close this out with anything,
Yeah.
is that at the end of the day, I'm actually more interested, from a filmmaking approach, I'm more interested now in Suicide Squad and the other movies
Yeah.
because I'm curious now. to answer that question. Is Zack Snyder the problem?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
And I think I think Suicide Squad will answer that question because personally, at this point, I think he is. I think they actually need somebody. They need a producer like Kevin Feige, who's like Kevin Feige from like Marvel has somebody to drive the ship.
Right.
And let the artists do what they do. So he lets James Gunn does what he does. Yeah, he had fights with Joss Whedon on things, but he still let Joss Whedon do what Joss Whedon does. Let the filmmakers do what they do. Instead of this, like, I think Zack Snyder took the jab at, this is filmmaker driven. Well, we just showed that you don't, you can't tell the story properly.
Yeah, we're not happy with the story that you told.
You could have done a better job with this.
Yeah.
Chris Nolan could probably do this.
Yeah.
But he doesn't want to.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the end of the day.
I think I remember hearing a rumor that they wanted Chris Nolan to basically be the Kevin Feige for the DC universe.
That wouldn't surprise me.
He said no, because he's interested in making his own movies.
Yeah.
And that's what it is at the end of the day.
All right, so that's pretty much wraps it up as far as our thoughts. I mean, there's always more things we could say, but a lot of those are going to depend upon further watchings and viewings and things.
Yes. I think I have a little bit more because I actually have gotten to see this movie twice.
Yeah.
I got a free ticket once, and then I got to see it again.
Yeah. But like I said,
I paid for.
Overall, I enjoyed my time.
This is not Batman and Robin.
No, it's not Batman and Robin. I thought the Doomsday fight was good.
It's not Batman Forever at that.
And
it's better than those two movies.
Yeah, I don't think I didn't get the same feelings of longness from the fights either. I know the Zod fight for me and Man of Steel went on too long, and this one I didn't get that feeling from it. But overall, I enjoyed it. So I mean, it has major problems, which it'll be interesting to see how they get out of that. So
yeah, we never know. So all right, guys, thank you for joining us on this special edition of Watch, Read, Listen, and we'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for visiting Watch.Read.Listen. You did it!
Yay!